let's talk a little bit about our presenters. So, I want to present and introduce to you your presenters, Janina Ostrich, Jeannie Bowen, Justine Diamond, and Rachel Jennings. They are coming to us with a combined experience in lean continuous improvement, project and change management, strategic planning, and human-centered design. They share a passion for staff engagement and development, as well as innovation and driving business outcomes. Be offering up their expertise on ways to align concepts of user-focused problem solving and how they integrated it in the process improvement methodologies many of us are so familiar with. Without any further ado, take it away, Justine.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you join us. I have the great honor of kicking this off, but before we dive in, we want to gauge how everyone is showing up. We have a poll for you. You can access the poll by navigating to www.menti.com and entering in the code that you see on your screen, or you can use that QR code with your phone, and that will take you directly to the poll. So go ahead and navigate there. Let us know how you're showing up. This is the most exciting part. I feel like it's a day at the races. Who's gonna win? Just pausing here for a moment to allow enough time for everyone to participate. All right, I see it slowing down slightly. It looks like most of you have never heard about human-centered design and you are intrigued. Thank you for engaging and indulging us for a moment. We hope that regardless of what level of understanding you are showing up with today, you walk away with something new, whether it's inspiration or a shiny new tool that you can implement right away. Speaking of which, our fabulous moderator should have shared the presentation handouts with you in the chat. Rachel Jennings created these beautiful tool handouts for you using her design talent. She really helped to bring this vision to life. So let's dive in. In state government work, it is challenging to reach our customers when they are the people in our communities. Sometimes we just don't have access to the people we serve. So we might initiate a problem-solving project with the best of intentions, but fall short because we didn't get the user's perspective. We enter into the process with our assumptions because sometimes that's all we have. Human-centered design is a process and a mindset to iteratively address complex problems by involving the human perspective. You can imagine how this mindset helps to alleviate that problem-solving gap. We have aligned human-centered design principles with the problem-solving methodology, Lean Six Sigma's DMAIC, you may already be familiar with. In order to make this a value-added hands-on session, we have incorporated a fictional problem we will use throughout. The situation is this. The Department of Child Learning has after-school programs that are not being used. They want to increase participation before the programs are no longer funded. It's pretty straightforward. So instead of proceeding with gathering data and brainstorming solutions with our assumptions about what DCL should do, we want to design solutions with our customers instead of for our customers. We will be using a generalized representation of a customer for our examples today. What you see on your screen is a persona. A persona summarizes the characteristics, behaviors, needs, expectations of a group of people you might be designing or problem solving for. Our persona is of single mom Sally. She has 2 grade school children. She does most things online, like grocery shopping and managing her Etsy side business. Sally considers herself tech savvy. She depends on family for childcare while she is working a full-time day job. She wants to provide for her children more opportunities to socialize while giving her family a break every now and then. Sally depends on a program that is free or low cost. She needs something local as her car is not always dependable. Sally is a busy working mom, and processes that are complicated and take too much time to complete frustrate her. They frustrate me too. So as problem solvers, the DMAIC process usually involves asking the customer to help define the problem and observing the problem by way of Gemba. This is really seamless when the problem you are solving is affecting internal customers. Your fellow employees are a lot easier to access. But what happens when your customer or stakeholder is not accessible? The design thinking process starts very similarly with research and discover. You seek to understand the problem and the impact it has on the end user. But is it ever only one end user? No, the customer is generalized. But in fact, the customer may actually be a variety of group segments of your customers. You have your single mom Sallys, your busy boss Barrys. You get the picture. If we think back to our persona of single mom Sally, we can start to empathize with what she is experiencing in her reality. An empathy map is a tool used collaboratively that allows you to gain insight into a target group. The goal is to glean what they might be thinking about your product, process, or service. You start by identifying the user, which might be your customer or an internal or other external stakeholder. We have done this with the persona. You will then brainstorm around each of the sections, trying to empathize with the person. When you finish the map, you will then analyze what requirements they have for the product or service you offer. By looking at their needs through these lenses, we can also see the complexity of their needs. For example, when they say one thing, but they do another. And we can begin to uncover solutions that meet them where they are. Let's give it a try. I'd like to ask the moderator to open up the chat for this activity. I want you to respond in the chat as I move us along the empathy map. And Rachel is going to enter in some of the responses that I read into the map. We're going to start with the upper left-hand quadrant. What is Sally thinking and feeling? It might be helpful to think about this in terms of quotations. If you were dialoguing with Sally about her concerns and motivations, what would she say? She's overwhelmed, she's frustrated, anxious. She needs time, her plate is full. She's too busy. She needs high quality care. She has low energy, burned out. She wants what's best for her kids. Wow, thank you everyone for your engagement with this. The chat is popping off. I think you guys did a great job capturing it. So moving right along then, what is Sally seeing in her environment? What are the trends that are influencing what Sally is thinking and feeling? Go ahead and record them in the chat. Bewildered, lack of committed support, inflation, COVID, economic issues, work-life balance. I know it's hard to keep up, Rachel. I'm trying to keep up myself here. Her family needs a break. She's trying to keep up with the Joneses, aren't we all? Lack of time to spend with family, feeling hopeless. Yes, I think you guys are capturing it. All right, and what is Sally hearing from her friends and family? From her community, what is she hearing? You need to slow down. You can do better. You should do this. Yes, a lot of opinions. Don't give up. You need rest. I have the same problem. You're doing great. Take care. Parenting advice. Yes. Scary stories. Great. I like that one. You are a woman warrior. All right. What are her behaviors, her attitudes and expressions? What is she saying and doing? Not sleeping, exhausted, frustrated, maybe losing her temper, worrying, again, stressed, short-fused, impatient. Awesome. All right, moving to the bottom, we have pains and gains. Let's start with the pains. What fears, frustrations, and anxieties does Sally have? Money, failure, time, child safety, support, love, children's well-being. Yes. And the last quadrant, what are her wants, her needs, and her goals? What are her gains? Looking more positively, what is she hopeful for? Family time, balance, self-care time. Yes, she needs some time to herself. Higher salary. Yes, financial security. Opportunities for her children. A better future. Great. All right, thank you. You can go ahead and turn off the chat. As you can see, we have developed a general understanding of how Sally is internalizing and responding to what she's experiencing in the world. We placed ourselves in her shoes for a moment to better understand how Sally might describe the problem and how she might design a solution that works for her. I'm going to pass it off to Janina now. She's going to take it away with the measure phase.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Justine. What we're looking at now is the measure phase of the DMAIC, which still lines up with that research and discover phase of human-centered design. In the measure phase, you're gathering your data, which supports the problem, and you're potentially identifying that gap between where you currently are and where you want to be. In HCD, or human-centered design, you're coming up with interview methods you would use to gather this information. In a perfect world, you'd be reaching out to your end users or your external customers and stakeholders for this. But for some of us that are in state or government work, this can get a little bit tricky. And that brings us back to what Justine was talking about earlier. By creating these specific personas or profiles and putting ourselves in someone else's shoes with the empathy map, this could help us to develop interview questions we may want to ask, while also proving or disproving any assumptions we may have already made. I'm going to put a pin in that concept just for a moment. So whether you're creating these personas or you actually have the ability to reach out to your customers directly, this is a great time to take an equity pause. So what's an equity pause? It sounds like some kind of exciting tool, but it's really not that fancy. It's more about being mindful and creating the space within your project team to ask some hard questions about how inclusive your process is. I won't read the whole list of questions here, but I will point out a couple of my favorites. So a couple that really resonate with me are, who are we not hearing from and why? And also, what practices do we need to update or improve to ensure that all voices are heard? If you're only worrying about the majority, you're going to continue to miss people. The more we are open about discussing our personal biases and acknowledging that there's more than one user experience or history, the better we will be prepared to get creative with our brainstorming, and also make sure that we're getting a more comprehensive and diverse customer perspective. You would want to build in an equity pause discussion throughout the process of problem solving. This is not a one and done situation, but we've highlighted it here in the measure or research and discovery phases, because that's when you're gathering that critical information about the current situation. This takes us back to that pin. The next tool we're highlighting are those interview methods, or what we call user interviews. While we've all seen some version of this, whether we're talking about the voice of the customer tool, surveys, conversation cafes, or focus groups, what they're called is not as important as making sure that you're gathering that real-time data. Taking the time to plan out the steps of who, how, and what are critical. Who do we need to interview? How or what are the logistics around gathering the input we need? And then what kinds of questions or information are we trying to gather? As you can see on this slide, we have identified a couple more tips or best practices around gathering good information from your users or customers. A couple of my favorite are: avoid yes or no questions. I know that this is so hard, but if you can rephrase your question to include getting the why, you'll have a lot better information moving forward. The other one that really stands out to me, which is also so hard, is avoid overstuffing the question. There's nothing worse than getting tricked into taking a survey because they say, oh, we're going to ask you 3 simple questions. And then each question has 5 more parts to it. So we don't want to overwhelm and frustrate our users. Be really thoughtful about what you need from them and keep it as simple as possible. And here we've also provided some question starters. You definitely want to make it relevant to your situation or potential problem that you've identified, but you can get the gist by taking a look at some of these ideas. Okay, so now we're going to open up the chat again. And since we've given you a couple of tips on creating good questions, we're going to practice together. We'd love to have you play along, and you guys have been super engaged so far. So I am just hoping that I can keep up with all of the chats that you might put in here. We're going to go back to the scenario around the Department of Child Learning's after-school programs not being used. And let's also remember that we created at least one persona from our potential customer base. And again, this is because maybe we don't have the option or the opportunity to reach out to them directly. So we're creating our personas and we're trying to spend a day in their shoes, right? So we've got single mom Sally here with her 2 fabulous children. And I know that the entire demographic of people that might be looking into after school programs might be a whole lot larger than the one that we've provided. So we're going to have you help us identify some other potential customers, some other stakeholders. Who else should we be reaching out to? Do you see any potential gaps? Oh, you do, because it's coming in hot. Okay. Other parents with kids with special needs, public schools, care providers, pediatricians, teachers, the YMCA. I love this. Single fathers, daycare parents, working parents, foster parents. These are all amazing. Grandparents with custody. Yes. All of these folks that are taking care of our kids that are not the traditional family structure, we have to think about that. Volunteer organizations, social workers, churches, religious groups. Yes, the list goes on and on. These are great. Absolutely. Okay. Keeps coming in. Coaches, I just have to have a shout out for that one. Yes, coaches, so important. When our kids are in other after school activities, when they're in sports, that's a great resource for us. All right, so now that we've identified some of those customers that we missed, I'd like to hear your ideas on how we would get their feedback. So what kind of mediums do you think would be successful? And we're not going to worry about what's realistic at this point because we're really just brainstorming and we're not going to talk about restrictions based on budget or resources now. Wow, again, you guys are amazing. Google Forms, school newsletters, brochures, social media, town halls, radio commercials, that's a great one. Zoom, direct mails, email, door knocking, tried and true, I like it. TV ads, PTA meetings, phone calls, Nextdoor app, flash mob. Yes, let's definitely flash mob this. Block parties. Some of these are amazing. And, you know, this is what's fun about this. When you really are brainstorming and you're letting people just say everything, you can come back to the table after that and you can really decide and prioritize what would work either for your school, your community, you know, what makes sense for the area that you're in. I love this. This is great. Okay. So now that we have a start on tackling that logistical piece, let's get to the meat of the interview itself. And as a reminder, this is in context around that poor participation in the after-school programs. So what kinds of questions should we be asking? And think back to our tips and best practices. Try to stay away from yes or no. Keep it simple. Keep it clear. I like this. Do you need after-school programs? What works for you? What barriers do you have? What after-school resources does your family need? Do you have special needs children? What hours do you need for this service? How can we assist your family? What is the budget you can afford, which is amazing? Yes. What programs do you want us to provide? Also amazing. Is there transportation assistance? What other resources do you need? I like this one. Paint me a picture of your thoughts on a perfect daycare. These are great. And I love this, not a yes or no question in the bunch here. What makes your family feel safe? Another amazing question. And these questions can continue to be refined, right? As you get a little bit more into what the problem actually is, as you get into, deciding what you should move forward with in order to brainstorm some solutions around this issue that you're having. So these are all amazing. Thank you so much for playing along. Great questions. Okay, so we're just going to touch on this really quick. We have in here the analyze phase of the DMAIC, where we're using tools like our fishbone diagram or our 5 whys to find that root cause of our problem. I just talked about that a second ago. You'll notice that we're still lined up with the research and discovery stage for human-centered design. We've already talked through using the equity pause, but we're highlighting it in this phase because we cannot stress how important it is to be thinking about this when you're discussing root cause. This could lead to some great discussions around equity and accessibility and make you think a little bit harder about whether or not you're hearing from all of your customers, not just the majority. Again, majority can work for certain things, but if you're really talking about making this accessible to everyone in your community, you have to find out why people are not going through these programs, and it might be the one-offs, it might not be the majority. So this is a great opportunity to go back and make sure you're thinking about those equity discussions. All right, and now Jeannie Bowen will take you through the next phase.
You're on mute, Jeannie.
Of course that would happen to me in front of 1,000 people. Okay. In this phase, we're lining up under the improve part of the DMAIC. And the improve part of the DMAIC corresponds to the brainstorm, prototype, and test part of human-centered design. And this is the exciting phase. This is where we get to brainstorm all of our ideas. So I'm going to go over an exercise with you to help get you brainstorming those ideas to prototype and test. In human-centered design, we say, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And this is going to help you do just that. So this is a tool we call How Might We? How Might We statements are used to help to reframe the problem as an opportunity and remove blame by defining the problem from the point of view of the person experiencing it. So why do we call these How Might We's? Well, how suggests that we do not have an answer yet. Might emphasizes that there are many different paths to explore. And we immediately brings the idea of teamwork. So the best How Might We statements do 3 things. They remove the bad, they emphasize the good, and they challenge assumptions. So first, let's take an example, a generic example. Kids are not eating enough vegetables, something that parents typically face. In looking at how to create a How Might We statement, the first step is to reframe this as an opportunity. So instead of saying kids are not eating enough vegetables, we say, how might we get kids to eat more vegetables? This is a good start, but we can make this How Might We statement even better by emphasizing the good. What good can come out of this opportunity? So we say, how might we make eating vegetables the most fun part of dinner? Now, with this, we could certainly generate a lot of great ideas, but we can do even better. The best How Might We statements challenge assumptions. And the best way to challenge an assumption is by using an analogy. So in our best How Might We statement, we say, how might we make eating vegetables even better than dessert? The assumption is dessert is the best part of dinner. And so this really gets us thinking outside of the box and how we might solve this problem. So let's take a business example now. Business examples are always a little more tricky. Our problem throughout this presentation is that our fictitious Department of Child Learning's after-school programs are not being used. So we can create a good how might we statement by reframing this problem as an opportunity so that it reads, how might we increase participation in Department of Child Learning's after-school programs? This opens us up to consider an array of solutions. But remember, a better how might we statement emphasizes the good. What good? What could be good about this? So our better how might we statement is, how might we ensure Department of Child Learning's after-school programs have the highest participation of all after-school programs? Now, this would certainly get us generating ideas to achieve a high target. But remember, the best how might we statements challenge assumptions. And so what is an analogy that we can use? In our best how might we statement, we said, how might we ensure Department of Child Learning's after-school programs have even more participation than soccer? The assumption is that soccer is the most popular extracurricular activity. So how could we make these after-school programs even better than soccer? This opens us up to thinking more creatively and outside of the box. So let's try this together. We're going to open up the chat for your participation. Imagine back in the analyze phase that you did your root cause analysis and your fishbone diagram and what other analysis tools you might have available to you. And you discovered that one of the biggest barriers is the application process for these programs. The application process is just hard. It's too long. The questions maybe don't make sense. And when people get that application and look at it, they sometimes just give up right there. So let's take a step and oh, excuse me, I'm out of order. So let's take this problem that the Department of Child Learning's application process is hard and rephrase that problem as an opportunity. What suggestions do you have? How might we create an easier application process? How might we create the 60-second application? Why do we even need an application? How can we make the application process easier? How might we make the application, how might we help you fill out the application? These are all great. How might we provide support to parents for completing the application? How might we keep it simple? These are great ways of reframing this problem into an opportunity. I love these. And it's really hard actually because they're sentences to read them when they go by so fast. How might we simplify the application process? So now that we reframed our problem into an opportunity, let's create a better how might we statement by emphasizing the good. How can we make this opportunity into something that is good? Be specific on a way to emphasize the good or desired future state. How might we make completing the application even more convenient? That might have been for the last one. How can we support families to complete the application? How might we make the application quick? How might we make this fun? I love that one. How might we make the application just one page long? How might we ensure access for parents to complete the application? How might we make that application less than 15 minutes to complete? Great work. Now, moving forward, we're going to make a best level, how might we statement, by challenging an assumption. So let's create a how might we statement that contains an analogy that gets us thinking outside of the box. How might we make the application process easier than online shopping? I love that one. Online shopping is way too easy. How might we make the application easy and fun? How might we eliminate the application process? How might we make this the easiest application for services in Washington State? I love it. How might we make the application as relaxing as a cup of coffee? That's great. How might we make the application vanish like a ghost? Getting close to Halloween. How might we show this service is better than soccer? Yeah. How might we make the application process like a game? Great work, everybody. I love this part of it because this is where you really start making some unusual links, such as making it easier than online shopping or making it easier than brewing a cup of coffee. And when you start making these analogies and comparisons to unlikely things, then you really start thinking out of the box. So now what do? We have our best level, how might we statements, what's next? So moving forward, there's one brainstorming method that I think works really well with this. And with this brainstorming method, you ask each participant in your group to generate 3 ideas. And so I did this myself, and I generated 3 ideas to help solve this problem of that application. My first idea was to create a TurboTax-like application to make applying easier. My second idea was to have an online chat option to provide help in the moment. And my third idea was to contract with a company to redesign the form and make it intuitive to complete. Now, these are good ideas, and with a whole team, everybody providing you 3, that's going to be nice, but we can do it even better. So the next part of this process is to come up with 2 additional ideas for each one of your 3 ideas, 2 additional ideas related to the first idea that you came up with. Now, this can be a little bit challenging, but this is where you're really pushing yourself to start thinking about different options. So for my initial idea of creating a TurboTax-like application to make applying easier, my 2 additional ideas were to create a video that walks people through completing the form and to have a helpline set up, staffed with employees who can answer questions. For my second idea, have an online chat option to provide help in the moment. My 2 additional ideas were to have instructions pop up when you hover over a form field and to create an FAQ document. And for my last idea, to contract with a company to redesign the form, I came up with plain talking the form and providing a cover sheet to go with the form that clearly explains the steps. Now, these are not the best ideas, but if you do this with a group or a team, you're getting 9 ideas from each participant. And that's amazing because when it comes to brainstorming, it's all about the quantity, not the quality. And you're bound to get several good ideas by doing this. Then you move forward and you filter them however you usually do in your organization. Maybe you affinity group, maybe you put it through a pick chart, however you determine what the best ideas are, what are the most feasible, what are the most impactful, you proceed in your normal way. And you will have several great ideas to choose from in the end. Now, one of the reasons why I really like this, I've worked for the state for 28 years, and I'm just going to tell you right now, I tend to think in a box. I tend to reuse the same solutions over and over. We've all been told no a million times. We don't have the resources. We don't have the FTEs. We don't have the money. And after years of kind of being told what you can and can't do, you tend to start coming up with ideas that are just really very similar to every other idea that you've had. And generating actual new, fresh ideas, outside of the box ideas, starts to get a little hard. So what I love about this exercise is that it really pushes you to start to think outside of the box, to think in a unique way, to make comparisons you wouldn't usually make, and to generate ideas you might not have pushed yourself to do before. So with that, I'm going to now pass this on to Rachel to finish up with our last phase.
Thank you, Jeannie. The last phase of the DMAIC, control, aligns with HCD's implement and refine phase. In the control phase, you're using your lean tools to implement improvements you've designed and monitor and adjust as needed to standardize the new process. In HCD's implement and refine, you're doing very much the same thing. You're piloting your prototypes and setting up systems to gather user feedback so you can continually refine your prototype until it's ready to launch. The last tool I want to share with you is the what, so what, now what, also called the W3. This tool can be used a couple different ways. Traditionally, it's used as a reflection tool where you look back on a process or prototype that you've experimented with or piloted with your project team to identify what happened and how to improve. The first step is what. Here you're describing what happened during the experiment or pilot. You just want the facts. Make sure you're not pointing fingers or placing blame. To help prompt discussion, you can ask questions like, what did you notice? Or what worked well and what didn't? Next is so what. Here you're analyzing and making sense of what happened during the experiment or pilot. Ask questions like, so what could have been done differently? Or so what did you learn, if anything? Last is now what? Here's where you come up with ideas on how to improve the process or prototype. Ask questions like, now what might the root causes of any identified issues be? Or now what would you do differently if you could do it over again? In our lean process improvement work groups, we've used the tool as a brainstorming tool. In the what stage, we look at our current process or current state and define what is going on. In the so what stage, we analyze the current situation and discuss what the impacts or implications are of continuing in the current state. And in the now what stage, we brainstorm ways to improve the current state. Here's a real live example of a W3 used in the traditional way to evaluate a prototype. The Division of Child Support has been using HCD to improve the modification process for our customers. Just like in the fictitious Department of Learning, was working to improve their online application process by creating a video that walks customers through completing an online application. The Division of Child Support actually did create a video on how to complete a form. That's required by our prosecuting attorneys to modify a court order. Once the video was created, we gathered a handful of customers to view the video and provide feedback. Some of the feedback we received from our customers was that the graphics were outdated and there wasn't a lot of color. During the video, we show a form, which is black and white, and then draw a black box around the form field we're drawing their attention to. Weirdly, this was not very attention grabbing. What really surprised us is customers not knowing where to find their pay stubs. With so many businesses being paperless and paying by EFT, younger generations have never seen a physical paycheck. We also didn't realize some customers were afraid to disclose information about their current living or financial situation because they thought we would use it to take their kids away. We're adjusting several things in the final version of the prototype. A couple of them are colored boxes around the form fields we want to draw their attention to, and adding into the script that this information is only being collected and used for the purposes of modifying child support. Along with making all those adjustments, we're also working with our communications team on branding and marketing, but we're hoping to launch before the end of the year. So that is all the information we have for you today. We do have some time for questions. Talia, what questions in the Q&A can we answer?
Hey, Talia, it looks like you're on mute.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for that. All right, 2 seconds. Let me pull that back up. Okay, so yeah, we have a lot of good questions, and a few of them in particular to the empathy map. One was somebody had joined a little late, and so they said, who is completing the form? Is it the designer, the customers, or both? For the
Yeah,
empathy map.
That's a good question. So it is the designer and the design team. If you are embarking on a problem-solving journey with a project team or a work group, you would complete this collaboratively as a team to glean insight into your customer segment. Great question.
Awesome. And also in reference to the empathy map, is it generalized, or should responses map back to the purpose/outcome that we're looking at the persona for?
I'll respond to that one as well. I would say it's helpful to think about the customer more generalized so that you can empathize with what they're experiencing, not just as it relates to the process or the problem that you're seeking to solve, because you might be able to identify some missed opportunities with that customer segment if you were solely focused on how they are experiencing the process or product that you are that you're looking at. Anything else, Rachel, Janina, or Jeannie, you want to add to that?
I was going to add something just really quick. These personas, again, if you have easy access to your external customer, you know, that end user, if you have easy access to them, this might not be something that you do, because you can go directly to your customer, right? This is really more of a tool when you're in those situations where you don't have easy access, or maybe your customer base is so huge that it would be really difficult for you to reach out to every different demographic. It's a way for you to try and get through the exercise and be aware of those other customer bases without necessarily reaching out to them. It's not as good. Like, we know it's different when you actually reach out to the customer. It's always better if you can. We're just saying in those situations where potentially that is much more difficult, or you have barriers to doing that, this would be another tool that you could use to still be thoughtful about how people might be perceiving your process or your product or your service or whatever that might be. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
I'll add on to that actually as well. So in our real life human-centered design project that we were working on, we did our equity pause, and we were really trying to be very conscientiously thoughtful in getting a diverse group to provide us input. But what we found is that the input we needed most from the people who were the people who were least able to get it. or give it, excuse me. And so when we did our surveys and our interviews and got external customer participation, they were usually of a group of a certain economic means. They had the ability to interface with us. They weren't in so much life stress that this was the last thing they could think of. But we have a lot of customers who are under a tremendous amount of life stress. And they just can't provide the feedback. And we desperately need it from them, but we can't get it. They're just not in a space to give it. And so this empathy map is one way of trying to build empathy for your end user so that you are designing products that hopefully better meet their needs.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to ask another one around the empathy map. It seems like you guys got a lot of good questions and engagement around that. This is actually, I'm going to combine two different people's questions because they both kind of relate to each other. So one person said, are you equating the empathy map with a customer service survey? How would this be applicable to the work of government agencies? And then the other person's question that's kind of relatable is, in government, we've got a lot of restrictions on data collection and P1 level data. So what are PI level data? So what thoughts do you have where an empathy map was used to deliver services? And how do we talk about collecting this kind of information with colleagues and leaders who want to mitigate risks of exposing individuals?
I can take a stab at that. So with an empathy map, if you're doing it with internal stakeholders, that isn't really a problem because it's just your project team's content around the empathy that you're trying to develop for that person. With regards to the external surveys we did with the surveys we did with our external customers, we did have to go through the board. Gosh, I'm blanking on it, but can you help me out? Anybody, do you know what I'm talking about? Rachel, anytime when you survey or get data from external sources, you have to go through this board to make sure that there's not going to be any problems. And if you know what I'm talking about, thank you. And if you don't, I'm so sorry. But there is like a national level thing and you have to go through it and they have to approve it. So we did have to do that. And then with regards to the data, we stored anything that had any personal data on it, case number, name, etc., on an internal network drive. So we had to coach through this process. She couldn't access that drive. So anything that we took and shared with her had to be scrubbed of all individual or personal information so that we were just looking at the content of their answers and nothing that would actually disclose who they were. I don't know if that answers your question, but I gave it a shot. Anybody?
Awesome.
I gotta look up that board name now.
Thank you. Yeah, look that up. Thank you, Jeannie. That's awesome. You guys got so many good questions. I want to get to at least another one. Is there a step to include the persons who actually filled out the applications in the process for redesign? If we miss that step, could we be missing an opportunity to be inclusive?
I can throw something out there for that. I think, yeah, you absolutely could miss an opportunity to be inclusive. And like we said, it's always the best if you can go directly to your customer. When you can't, that's when you might use some of these other tools. It can be really difficult. And we've talked about this before, you know, some of those demographics that we're really worried about, that we really want to make sure that the forms are easy to understand, that the forms are accessible. Those are the folks that have the most barriers and are harder to reach. But that's when we get creative too, right? It might be about trying to get feedback through a different part of the system or a different part of you know, a process or service that they're receiving, and trying to work with another agency to say, hey, if they need help, you know, make sure that they're connecting to us, give them our direct information so that we can walk through and get some feedback on these bits and pieces. I think every time you talk to a customer, it's an opportunity to get firsthand information, firsthand input and feedback on what processes work and what doesn't. And I think we need to be really aware of that. And that's part of it. You know, we might not be able to change all of our processes, but the more we are aware of that and the more we're listening to those complaints and taking some of that information in and trying to improve our processes, that's a way of using human-centered design principles in our everyday work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janina, Rachel, Justine, and Jeannie for such an awesome session. Thank you for answering all the questions that we were able to get to. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for Kelly Brunson and Janine Lester for your ASL interpretation. And we're just so happy that we all got to see this awesome session. I hope you guys take advantage of those materials available. Go back and look